Well, hello. My name is Tamsin. I am a playwright and journalist and PR. One of these days, I will just be one thing, but until then, many things for many buyers. This is my embryonic YouTube channel, which I'm being kind of gently incubated to create over the next 6 months to a year with the support of BBC and YouTube, which is bloody interesting. Now, the style and quality of this will improve over the coming months, but for now, stay with me while I explore things like culture and sustainability in the UK, how those things are elevating people's lives or how they can, and also left field passions and projects, and some commentary around the news on that subject matter too. But for now, I've been asked to make a video about the National Year of Reading. This is very exciting to me for many reasons, so let's have a think about that. Now, reading, it isn't simply a mechanism through which we entertain ourselves, right? I mean, often, yes, but there's so much more going on. I really believe that it's an essential part of how we mature into adults. It teaches us resilience, how to self-soothe, and really helps us build those imaginative faculties that help us negotiate life, people, places, and things. Now, I think one way in which books help us build resilience as little people is by understanding our context as small people living in the world as children and recognizing the activities, the daily routines of other children in the world, but temporally in a way that we can really process. Look back, pause, reflect, turn a page, and understand, probably with an adult there to help us. Now, I want to draw your attention to, well, I'll take you on a whistle stop tour of my book collection. And I want to start with Jan Ormerod, who is an illustrator who came over from Australia. She married a children's librarian, actually, and motherhood was a real boon for her because her child, Sophie, became the subject of these two books, Moonlight and Sunshine. And they take us through the processes of going to bed and rising in the morning, but actually in really well studied detail in terms of the dynamics between the parents and the child. So I'll just show you a little of this. See, you can see here the little girl based on Sophie, Jan's daughter. She's really struggling to go to sleep. You can see the stages of that here. And she's sitting up having a think, and then we have the empty bed, and suddenly she's back in the daytime world with her parents. They're trying to soothe her. And as you can imagine, she ends up spending some quality time on her dad's chest. Very cute. And also in Sunshine, you can see the distinct stages of her getting dressed here and trying to pull off her dressing gown and pull on various pieces of clothes there. That is a beautiful double page spread, actually, isn't it? Look at that. And as a child, you can relate to this and you may not be intellectualizing it, but it just helps you contextualize who you are in the world and what you're doing. And that can carry on throughout life, with YA books and adult literature. So I think you gain my points. Another reason why reading is brilliant for resilience is that it's an excellent form of self-soothing. Now, let's be honest, I am an older millennial and proud of it. And I was one of the last generations, if not the last, to grow up without a mobile phone or much access to the digital world. I believe we had a second-hand Amstrad at some point. We tried to get to level 3 of Monkey Island, myself and my father, and we never did it. So clearly, great minds. But my point is, books were the thing, especially as an only child, that I would return to for self-soothing. So these YA books that took you into new worlds, like books by Leon Garfield, who I think was an absolute master, especially of historical fiction for younger people, was something that you could dive into when actually the real world wasn't giving you what you needed: entertainment, interaction, if the adults were too busy, if nobody wanted to play with you, if you were an only one, um, books became a refuge, and they were very much for me, and they shaped a lot of my personality because of this. And in this way, books are self-soothing. They give you an escape, but they give you a slow escape that you're taking at your own pace. and at the organic pace of your own imagination, you're partly constructing a new world with the interface of a book. Whereas, obviously, if you're scrolling through TikTok, for instance, you're just taking in constant stimuli, which is not your own creation, which you don't participate in so much. And actually, is it doing anything to help you self soothe? That is my question. Maybe in the moment, but I think the pace of it, the frantic nature of it is, let's be honest, I think it's very damaging. I was sitting working remotely in a cafe bookshop the other day, and there was a young boy of about 9 sitting at the table in front of me, and he was there for the duration of about 2.5 hours that I was there. And this, bear in mind, is a shop that's absolutely covered wall to wall in books. And there's some kid books and some YA books and some, very simply written adult books that he could have gotten into. And what was he doing? He was scrolling TikTok for 2.5 hours. I was intermittently watching him like a nutter. Um, and it made me profoundly sad. And he was doing it out of habit. It wasn't a decision necessarily, it was just what he was doing. Um, Media literacy, perhaps, but where is the resilience building and self soothing mechanism in that? So, yes, Leon Garfield, brilliant for introducing young people to new worlds and quite, well, darker, more complex ideas. So, I just read the very short blurb. Smith was a pickpocket and a very accomplished one at 12 years old. But the instant he empties the pockets of a certain old gentleman, he finds himself caught up in a dangerous web of murder, intrigue, and betrayal. So, not necessarily pretty subject matter, but it's just introducing it to you in a sort of age appropriate way, I suppose, and in a highly imaginative way, and taking you into new worlds. The construction of new worlds through books being something that really helps grow our imaginations. And believe it or not, imagination is one of those things that helps us survive in life through difficult circumstances. So, talking about resilience, self soothing, let's now talk about the manifold benefits of building your imagination through books. Now, we're also aware of C.S. Lewis and the Inklings and Oxford and the Chronicles of Narnia, and C.S. Lewis's interest in sort of Christian mysticism and mythology and how that works into these books. So I have the series that was illustrated, I think, probably looking at the hair, in the early 80s, by Stephen Lavis. I still have the whole set, it's slightly faded. But thinking about building imaginary worlds, yes, you can view a film and you can build a sense of rapport with that film, with that product. But there's something a bit more secretive about holding on to the reins and the pace of a hero's quest story in a book. And I say hero's quest story, so that sense that you're rooting for a protagonist who's overcoming obstacles in order to achieve something that reveals something essential about them. And they're always, heroic. They may be an underdog, but they're always heroic, male, female, anything, anyone in between. So I believe that these books really help us own that feeling of being a hero in one's own story. And that may sound incredibly schmaltzy and Hollywood, but actually, it's also another way, another mechanism of approaching life with resilience is understanding that you're a person that will face many obstacles. And then I have to say it, formative books like this help us understand that there are things that we can't see, there are things that we don't fully understand in the immediate, tangible world. And they help lend us a sense of imaginative faculty that can help us look at the world in a critical way. What is going on here? What is hierarchy? What are the messages behind this? What are the ethics behind this? What does this person want from me? What am I giving to this situation? What are my emotions at this moment in time? This interaction of reading and world building through heroes' quest stories really helps with all of those critical faculties that, let's face it, you need in order to make good choices. Um, I wouldn't say I've always made good choices, but building imaginary worlds through books has certainly helped me. So now we're quite deep into the realms of imagination. I just want to pick out a slight point about that devilish thing which parents hate, which I'm not a parent, but I see my friends who are parents wrestling with this thing. And this thing is franchises that are amazing because they're constantly developing new ideas for products, merchandise, consumables, and stuff that you have to buy. But here is a very old-fashioned, gentle kind, a franchise, The Flower Fairies by Cecily Mary Barker. Now, Cecily Mary Barker was actually around in the early 1900s. Well, she lived longer than that, but that's when she first published. And she actually supported her mother and her sister at the age of 17 when her father sadly passed away by illustrating, personifying flowers found in an English garden. And she quickly wrote several books taking us through the seasons. See, Flower Fairies of the Spring was the first, and then she made an absolute mint out of the subsequent, Flower Fairies of Autumn, Winter, etc. So these are, as you can see, very charming. There's a verse with each which takes us a bit into English folklore and, as I say, the language of flowers. She was very inspired by Kate Greenaway, who's one of the old Victorian Edwardian illustrators that many people have looked up to and revisited. Now, these had a resurgence of popularity in the 1970s, and consequently, what was developed was a whole universe of fairy personas based on these different flowers. And you can see they've all got neat different types of 1950s styly hair and petal skirts and wings. But more excitingly for me, these fell out of popularity around the sort of late 80s, 90s. And I found this entire menagerie of plastic flower fairy folklore, if you like, in car boot sales. I found the secret garden, I found the petal pool, I found the fairyland home, minus some bits and bobs. But the fairy bedchamber I did actually get for a birthday at Christmas. I was very, very proud. Now, my point here, without rambling too much, is that when you have a cycle of books that allow you into a special world, and then you can construct some of the places and the universe of those books as integrated with your day-to-day life, that's pretty mind-blowing and special, isn't it? And that's what I was able to do with the flower fairies at the bottom of my garden. And I'm sure many other little girls did too. This is the same of, computer games and films, but as I say, I think there's something different about having ownership of books, reading them at your own pace, digesting them, and being a partner in how that world is built and created. Now, last but certainly not least, let's have a chat about Enid Blyton. Love her name, Enid. It's very, very strong. And she was a very strong character, controversial character in life. After divorcing her husband, she wouldn't allow him to see their children. And obviously, her legacy has been controversial because she was writing within a framework and time where certain communities weren't recognised appropriately. And, there's much offensive material in some of the books that are out of print. However, as an exercise in separating the author from the works, which can sometimes be done, other times not, um, Enid Blyton and the Mallory Towers series. So Mallory Towers actually really helped kind of shape my idea of what core values were, which is a big statement. And it also helped me adjust the idea of going somewhere a little separate and different for school. So I unexpectedly passed an exam and went to a private girls' school at the age of 11. Wasn't expecting to do this. There was no plan for me to do this from my family. It was pure serendipitous um, kismet that I ended up going to this private girls' school near to where I lived. Anyway, no one around me could really relate to this too much except my grandmother, who had a radically different upbringing to everyone else in my family. So we could actually talk a little bit about what it's like going into one of these institutions. And because they're so archaic and so old fashioned, these books help prepare me just a little bit. Although they did give me the idea that private schoolgirls were perhaps nicer and better behaved. Who would have thought? Um, but as a big statement, books like this and sort of First Term at St Clair's and the whole canon from Enid Blyton in that sort of schoolgirl vein really helped give me a sense of core values, believe it or not. There's a lot of stuff here around honour and pluck and being a team player. And it really sinks in after a few books what it is that this world of a school expects of these girls and how that might translate into your understanding of how you fit into an institution and how you interact with other people. And the characters that were particularly, celebrated were ones who took care of other people, were quite brave. There were lots of escapades over the rocks because I imagine this place is based on somewhere like Rodine, which is by the seaside, where girls are kind of, saving each other from floating out to sea during midnight picnics. Anyway, long story short, things like pluck and honour, deeply old fashioned, but actually we could do with a bit more of, trustworthiness and core values like courage and you know what I mean in the world today. So, having gone through this wildly therapeutic trip down memory lane into my childhood book collection, I would like to know what books have stayed with you well into adult life, what books have helped shape you, and what are you thinking of doing to promote reading to the next generation during 2026, the National Year of Reading? Okay, see you soon. Take care.